The reason I chose this one, I have many favorite poems, is written by Jim Morrison, who's also a musician and lead singer for The Doors, but I really became interested in his poetry when I was in high school, and that led me to a further study of the poets that influenced him and his writing, so I thought it was more apropos as high school students to look at the work of someone that you may know. So this poem is called An American Prayer, but it goes into 3 sections, so then it's An Hour for Magic, and then the final installment is A Feast of Friends, which was all recorded audio recordings by Jim Morrison himself, so if you ever want to listen to them on YouTube, I'm sure you can watch them. Well, this poem right now makes me feel reminiscent of when I was young, like 17, 16, when I first discovered this poetry. It has a lot to do with living in Los Angeles and the energy of that city. Also, a lot to do with transition and metamorphosis and shedding of old skins and becoming something new. So it reminds me of that whole time in my life because I decided to move to Los Angeles because of this poetry. I have all of the books of poetry that Jim Morrison wrote. There's one called Wilderness, one called The Lords and the New Creatures, and the final one being An American Prayer, which is also available as an audio recording of spoken word. And from the work of Morrison, I kind of studied all of the people that he had listed as his influences, and led me really into the whole world of poetry. William Blake would be one, Rimbaud, Verlaine, Baudelaire, many other poets, into all of the beat poets, Ken Kesey and Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, all of their poetry I was exposed to from originally looking at and listening to and reading Morrison's work. There's 2. One is when he says, "O great creator of being, grant us one more hour to perform our art and perfect our lives," which that always struck me as being profound. And at the end of, there's like 3 different lines in here that speak to me. It's the ones that's at the beginning. Then there's one in the middle where it says, "Where is the wine, the new wine dying on the vine? Resident mockery, give us an hour for magic. We of the purple glove, we of the starling flight and velvet hour, we of Arabic pleasures breed, we of sundown in the night." And that's kind of a transitional part of the poem, and it relates to the beginning. And then the final lines are really sad. Maybe it strikes me right now as being really sad is because obviously Jim Morrison died quite a while ago, but they play this spoken word part of his poetry oftentimes as like a eulogy or when they're showing his grave, so it has this really forlorn music that they play along with it, so maybe that's why it's so sad to me now. But the last line of this poem, which he read like pretty much, I'd say it was 1970, so a year before his death. So in that way it may have been somewhat prophetic or an omen of his impending doom. But it says, "Do you know how pale and wanton thrillful comes death on a strange hour, unannounced, unplanned for, like a scaring, over-friendly guest you've brought to bed? Death makes angels of us all and gives us wings where we had shoulders smooth as raven's claws. No more money, no more fancy dress, this other kingdom seems by far the best, until its other jaw reveals incest and a loose obedience for a vegetable law. I will not go, prefer a feast of friends to the giant family." So I think it's kind of sad when you hear that now, where he's renouncing really life and renouncing this whole no more money, no more fancy dress. This was the time in his life when he pretty much gave up being a rock star and moved to Paris to be a poet full-time. I discovered this poem when I was probably in 10th or 11th grade. I started really getting into the Doors music and really just music from that era of the 60s and 70s, which is before my time, but I just had a real interest in listening to that kind of music, old rock, and getting into some deeper cuts of different music, and the Doors being much more poetic and kind of psychedelic and obscure in their lyric stylings. And so from there I started doing some research about Morrison, and I actually got the first book of it was his biography out of my high school library, and from there I kind of went off and started buying all the beat poets, an anthology of beat poetry, and all of Morrison's poetry books, and that's kind of started a lifelong study of this kind of work. I really always enjoyed it ever since then. I'd say one of many of my favorite poets, but I chose this one because this is kind of what introduced me to like a further study of poetry. If it wasn't for getting into like the whole Jim Morrison and the Doors thing when I was in school, I don't know if I would be ever been exposed to, at that time in my life anyway, a lot of the poets that were so influenced Morrison. And I would make lists of all the people that he referred to in his writing or in interviews, and kind of on my own go out and get their work and study it. So from there it just opened up a whole world to me of many poets whom I love.